Hello and welcome to Dialogue. The State Council Information Office of China has released a white paper titled The Belt and Road Initiative, a key pillar of the global community of shared future. The document aims to provide a better understanding of the value of the BRI and what it has delivered over the past 10 years. So how can we evaluate this initiative? What does the BRI mean for the many partner countries who have joined? And can the BRI maintain stability even in today's slow economic growth? To further examine the past decade of the BRI and its current status, I'm glad to be joined by Charles Liu, founder of HAO Capital and Senior Fellow at the Taihe Institute, Dr. Syed Mahmud Ali, Associate Fellow at the Institute of China Studies of the University of Malaya, and Harvey Dzodin, Senior Fellow at the Center for China and Globalization. That's our topic. I'm Xu Qinduo. Welcome to Dialogue. Charles, I will start with you. The white paper, the Belt and Road Initiative, a key pillar of the global community of shared future. It aims to provide more information, more insight about the initiative over the past 10 years. And also it demonstrates, China's commitment to building a community with a shared future for mankind. So over the past 10 years, how has the initiative been accepted by countries or regions, or the UN organizations, for example, or during the period?
During this period, hundreds of projects were executed, mostly in infrastructure, in delivering infrastructure to the Belt and Road countries, in enhancing transportation, enhancing telecommunication, electricity, building electricity plants to supply electricity. This has benefited many developing countries, and this is recognized by developing countries as having made a major contribution to accelerate their development efforts. And it includes, I think, the Chinese expression, to become wealthy, you have to build a road first. And this is the basic fundamental thesis of Belt and Road Initiative.
Mm-hmm. Well, Charles, you mentioned or you stressed mostly global the South, global South or developing countries participating in the Belt and Road Initiative. Are you saying that mostly, the members are developing countries, but not many from the developed world?
Well, I don't see the United States as a member of the Belt and Road Initiative. There are some Europeans, and they've benefited as well, because as part of Belt and Road, a number of railways, Trans-Eurasian Railway was built between China and Europe, and that has really addressed the issue of transport cost. Higher efficiency, more on time. Instead of waiting 3 months for a ship to arrive, it's 2 weeks by train. So these things facilitated trading between Asia and Europe significantly as well. So that efficiency enhancement makes things cheaper and more efficient for deliveries of goods and services, as well as people and ideas.
Harvey, the white paper calls the BRI a pillar, a key pillar of the global community of shared future. What's your take on that? It seems like that's somehow represents, part of the Chinese vision of what kind of a world China wants to see.
Yeah, absolutely it does. So when you have this project that 10 years ago was just a proposal, and look at it now, a decade on, and see how much it's accomplished, the 150 plus countries that are involved, the more than $1 billion in projects, the more than 30 different international organizations. So I believe that this is a demonstration that some countries only mouth a bunch of words, but there's a few countries like China that put their money where their mouth is and work with other countries to have a win-win solution. So I believe that this was a visionary proposal from President Xi a decade ago. And I think what's amazing about it is that it's taken shape. Yeah, of course, there have been bumps in the road. And of course, in something so big, you have to fine tune it. But I can see here, even sitting in Austria, that goods are coming here, as Charles said, much more quickly, much more efficiently, with lower shipping costs. And so we're really what China has been building with these other partner countries is, if you take an analogy to the human body, China has built this whole skeleton, but put veins and arteries and all kinds of other organs on it that work. And it's not only working in one direction. You know, there used to be a joke when this was announced that it was the one belt, one way. In other words, this stuff was just going to flow from China to everywhere else. But that's not the way it's turned out. It's increased the flow of two-way commerce in the countries involved. So it's a tremendous achievement. And I believe that we're not at the end of this achievement. We're just at the beginning of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, Harvey, you reminded me of this. At the very beginning of BRI, I believe, there's much talk of the lack of investment in infrastructure. For example, for the Asia Development Bank at that time, strongly pointed out that there's a lack of trillions of dollars in infrastructure investment, because infrastructure does lead to more connectivity, which leads to growth. So ultimately, BRI programs, can we say, is about commerce, is about investment and trade or economic expansion?
It's partly about economic expansion, and maybe it's mostly about it, but it's also a lot more than that. Just as the ancient Silk Road had commercial dimensions, it also had cultural dimensions. And the fifth pillar of BRI is about cultural interconnectivity between countries and societies. And I believe that that pillar is crucially important. Everybody usually just sees the infrastructure and it's massive and it's awesome. But what's being done here is building a community of shared future for the world, for mankind, by having people coming together and getting to know each other better. I think one of the great benefits of BRI is that so many diverse countries are now able, through BRI, to communicate with each other and work together with each other. And I think that this is why there's a very excellent foundation for going forward in the decades to come.
Yeah, something intangible too here. Ali, from your perspective, where you live, for example, in Malaysia, how do you see BRI platform for cooperation? What does the BRI mean to Malaysia and also the region?
Well, as you know, that Malaysia has been involved in the BRI enterprise from the very beginning. There have been a number of very large-scale projects, and I will mention only one, the East Coast Rail Link, that railway line that's being built, connecting Malaysia, the peninsulas east to the west, so that ships do not have to traverse the whole length of the peninsula and then carry goods from one side to the other side. The railway line crosses very difficult terrain, which requires a lot of tunneling and terrain management. And that's all being done as part of the BRI. There are other projects as well, but that is the biggest one. It's also been slightly difficult and challenging. It has been revised and refined. But Malaysia is not the only country, as you mentioned. Our neighbor Indonesia has just launched a big metro line, a very fast, high-speed railway line. That's taken a few years, cost a lot of money, but finally it is up and running. And similarly, there are other projects right across the ASEAN grouping of countries where BRI has brought in a lot of benefits. But I'd like to we are talking about the present and the future, but I think looking back as a student of history, just consider this for a moment, that for over 60 years, many multilateral organizations like the Economic Commission for Asia and the Far East, or ECAFE, then the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, ESCAP, UN Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, UN Development Program, and as you mentioned, Asian Development Bank, even the World Bank have been talking about transcontinental, trans-Eurasian transportation and communication link. They've been holding conferences, drafting blueprints, discussing this, revising this, costing them. But until China brought all these disparate programs and ideas together and then launched the BRI, nothing, almost nothing had actually been done. This is a leap of imagination, effort, resources, funding, management, hardware, software. It's an incredible program. It's not been undertaken before in the planet's history. And we just wait. We have just spent 10 years of it, and this may go on for decades. It's quite a dramatic project.
Dramatic project, Dr. Ali. You also compared, the Chinese practice with the previous, let's say, lack of practice, lack of realization, let's say. So does that have something to do with the Chinese own experience? For example, they stress very much about the infrastructure. As Charles said, if you want to get rich, build a road. That's the Chinese belief, and so what they believe in, and probably they say, you know what, we want to connect the countries or regions so we can do business in a better way.
I just want to point out something in my research, which led to a book a couple of years ago. China's domestic developmental experience has played a very significant role in this. You may remember that when reform and opening up began in 1978 79, it was mostly a very narrow coastal belt along the east of the country, about a dozen centers, major cities and harbors and ports that saw dramatic expansion of economic activity, production, distribution, and consumption. Um, and China's economy became very narrowly focused on the coastal belt. And the National Development and Reform Commission became quite concerned about this. And in consultation with the World Bank over the last 30 years, they have moved the concentration of wealth from the east coast to the center of the country, and then from the center to the west of the country. And this is quite dramatic. This experience has transformed China, not just building of infrastructure, which is a major part of that movement of development, but also how connecting the Chinese people, knitting the Chinese people into a nation, if you like, for the first time that is really integrated like never before. This has never happened before. And then the discovery was that if you want to develop the West, like Xinjiang, like Yunnan, and the large city area of Chongqing or Inner Mongolia, then you got to give them the ability to connect with their markets where they can move things around. So, delegation of authority, particularly to Chongqing and to Yunnan and also to Sichuan, to enable them to engage with neighboring countries, not neighboring provinces, neighboring countries.
Yes, yes, indeed. Charles, as Dr. Ali has said, the connectivity or the infrastructure connectivity, does play a very important role in China's own development. Not long ago, there's a piece, I think, by Wall Street Journal saying that, Chinese manufacturers are not moving to other countries like India. They are actually moving inland from the coastal area to the inland provinces. I think partly probably that has something to do with this wonderful infrastructure, connection with the highway, the railway, high-speed railway in particular. So what does the BRI mean for China?
It has meant a number of things. If you recall, when it started in 2012, 2013, it was just after the 4 trillion RMB stimulus program to address the financial crisis of 2008, for the global financial crisis. What happened at that time I believe, was that that 4 trillion RMB initiative has built tremendous capacity in infrastructure building, because most of that 4 trillion went into infrastructure building throughout the country. So there was substantial capacity to do infrastructure building. So for China, three things happen. One is that you take that expertise in infrastructure building and then move it to Belt and Road countries. So you end up with Belt and Road countries benefiting from the expertise gained by China's extremely large program on infrastructure. Number two is with Belt and Road, you end up with integrated regional integration. ASEAN countries is one. The also the Middle Eastern countries is another. The North African countries is another. When these countries, if they're very small, there's no efficiency in the market. So market integration, because of Belt and Road support, has created much better sizable markets, so you can have higher efficiency. And the third is Belt and Road allow China to expand its export capacity and import capacity. You end up with very efficient manufacturing, and then to be able to export substantial amounts of goods through the Belt and Road countries, leading to very substantial trade surpluses in China, and then accessing these markets is really, really very beneficial. So I think these are the three things that China has gained. And the first thing, in terms of using China's expertise by Belt and Road countries, involves significant employment opportunities for the Chinese people, because these projects that's being conducted abroad required a lot of civil engineers, electrical engineers, and others. And these were provided by China, aside from local employment increases. So there is also that aspect of the Belt and Road, which was very beneficial for China.
Beneficial for China, but there's also, Harvey, as you said, there are bumps on the road. There are accusations, sometimes serious accusations of BRI projects, like debt trap, for example. Many people have actually demystified that kind of accusation, but still, because of the pandemic, because of the Ukraine war, because of the interest rates raised in the U.S. So, developing countries, many of them are part of this BRI initiative there. So they are facing some debt issues. So, how should we view these issues, and how can we solve that?
Okay, well, first I wanted to add to something that Charles said. I think that in terms of benefit, it's definitely win-win for all countries. But I think that on many levels, China has benefited because the Belt and Road has also resulted in something that people don't talk about very much. It's about standardizing technical specifications. So BRI has promoted standardization, and thereby it's lowered costs and increased efficiencies. And I think it also benefits President Xi's dual circulation policy by helping to provide components used in Chinese goods, given that we live in a globalized world. And like it or not, everything is intertwined. So decoupling or its near cousin, de-risking, they're not really viable options today or tomorrow. But yeah, you're right. People do criticize China BRI initiative as a debt trap. But I think it's just propaganda, because there's not been ever one iota of proof. And the fact is that 150 nations and dozens of international organizations are still participating in $1 billion plus program. I think the proof is in the pudding, as they say. And they say that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So why then do US and EU, for example, have their own half-baked versions of BRI? I call the US Build Back Better World and EU Global Gateway initiatives both BRI light. because they seem to be designed only as marketing ploys to blunt China's effort, not to seriously address all the dimensions that BRI has begun to successfully address. So I think all this business about debt traps and stuff and these other half-baked alternatives are just throwing sand in China's face. But the proof is the fact that the BRI is progressing, it's growing, and it's going to continue to grow in the decades to come.
Well, Dr. Ali, as Harvey mentioned about globalization, of course, we know there's ongoing decoupling or de-risking efforts by the U.S. and European countries with China here. Some other people would say, BRI is globalization 2.0. But at the same time, we do realize that there is a process of, people call it a retreat of globalization or deglobalization. So what's your take of BRI? What kind of a role it may play in global economic growth here?
I think if you're talking about the countries involved in the BRI enterprise, which is the 150 plus countries that are directly involved in this project, various projects, part of the terrestrial, this is Silk Road Economic Belt, and also the MSR, the Maritime Silk Road. And they have a whole diversity of different kinds of programs and projects that are linking economies and peoples and countries and governments, and as we just heard, standards being unified. So if this group of countries that are benefiting from BRI can persevere through very great difficulties currently and come out of it with demonstrable benefits from their involvement in BRI, then it is possible, as has been said, the taste of the pudding is in the eating. Other countries will see this experience as something to gain from, and BRI will then stand out as perhaps an example or a model or a paradigm with which to approach the world's economic problems. And the world has numerous economic problems, and the more help we can get, the better it is. And BRI might just be a starting point.
BRI might be a starting point to solve that problem, or massive problems there out. Charles, as a global economy, the prediction is that they are getting slower. There's a concern, in the major economies, U.S. inflationary pressure, European countries, China. We do see economic slowdown. How will that impact the BRI programs?
There's no question there will be an impact on every country in the world, especially given the fact that inflationary pressures has reduced consumer demand in Europe and the US. But if you look at trade numbers, there was a decline in the first half of the year in China, but it's picking up again. And the trade between BRI countries, especially the groupings of BRI countries, like ASEAN countries and China, trade between the Middle East and China, the trade between Central Asia and China is all increasing and increasing substantially. So BRI facilitating movements of goods and people and ideas will certainly impact on the decline in the global economy. I think there are other things which are to be built into the BRI, which is also going to stimulate more economic activity, such as digital economy for the BRI, such as green BRI. These are all additives which will enhance further BRI's impact on the economies of the member countries and will also help to alleviate some of the shortfalls that the global economic downturn has brought about.
Well, Harvey, you seem to be very confident that decoupling, de-risking won't work. And for many developing countries, they do benefit from the process of globalization because more trade, more investment. That ultimately will work for the benefits of their economic expansion. So with BRI, with more connectivity, so are you meaning that the countries will choose to get connected instead of getting walled from each other?
Yeah, I believe the trend has been and still will be to globalization. I think it's inevitable. We can't go back to a 18th century disconnected world. We need to find ways to work together and to cooperate with each other. And I think that these efforts at de-risking and decoupling are generally going to fail. I think it's going to be efforts like BRI that are going to be successful in the end because they're win-win. And it's not one country or one group of country telling other people what to do or how they're going to benefit and things like that. This is actually about results and it's about participation. BRI is not a top-down model. It's a collaborative model. It's a win-win model. And I think one of the benefits of it is that these countries, so many countries of the world involved in it, have another platform through which to communicate with each other, cooperate with each other, work together with each other. And I think that is another spin-off from BRI that's going to carry us into the future. I think that BRI goes far beyond any of the free trade zones or agreements that have been made, even going back to the GATT, because beyond free trade zones and trade rules and tariff reductions, BRI has a 360-degree focus, and that's policy coordination, infrastructure development, investment and trade facilitation, and also financial integration, and what I mentioned before, culture and social exchange. I think these are all important, and this is a program that's designed for people to cooperate with. It's win-win, and I believe it's going to work into the future, even if there's economic or political headwinds from time to time.
Dr. Ali, we are going to have this the third Belt and Road Forum for International Cooperation in Beijing, big conference. So for the next 10 years, next 5 years, next stage of the BRI, what's your suggestion? What's your advice for all those countries together with China? How they should probably develop, move into next stage?
Well, for one thing, I would recommend that refine, revise, fine-tune, but also listen to the customer. It's really important. Until now, it has been a Chinese initiative, as it should be, because nobody had the wherewithal or the imagination or the capacity to bring all these myriad of elements together. Only China.
It seems we have a tech glitch there. Charles, what's your suggestion or what's your prediction for next stage of BRI?
I think next stage 1, version 1.0 was infrastructure principally. Stage 2 is going to be digitization, green, regional integration, and modernization. That's version 2.0 for Belt and Road.
It's like upgrading of BRI for the next stage or next 5 to 10 years. Well, with that, we come to the end for today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also find us on the CGTN app on YouTube. Thank you for being with us. I'm Xu Qinduo. See you next time.